If you do this, you're gonna lose fat. If you do this, you're gonna lose fat a little bit faster. If you do both, you're not gonna lose fat at all. Like, how does that even add up, right? There's a lot of this out there. We have no shortage of information, no shortage of content, and no shortage of really missing the forest for the trees in a lot of this stuff. If you're a beginner and your goal is losing fat, be careful all the content that you consume, because there's really only one thing that matters the most. And that is, how are you going to get the fat off? How are you going to get the maximum amount of caloric burn while maintaining your muscle mass? Now with this, there's some relatively newer literature, but also some really landmark literature that's not old, but it's tried and true, and it's been tried and tested, and it still comes back to us. So we're gonna break down a couple of these studies, and you're gonna end up with an easy answer that's pretty much what you want to hear to begin with. Today's video sponsor is LMNT electrolytes. If you are trying to lose weight, it is a great thing to sip on just because they taste good and there's practically no calories. But if you're also working out and you're starting to work out, especially if it's cooler out or hot out, your body kind of upregulates the minerals that are utilized, and it's easy to deplete them. So LMNT is a really tasty 1,000 milligram sodium, 200 milligram potassium, 60 milligram magnesium electrolytes. They come in a wide variety of flavors. My favorite is the grapefruit salt. That one is tremendous. The citrus salt, and then the chocolate flavors are amazing as well. So that link down below, drinklmnt.com/Thomas, gets you a free variety pack with any purchase. And I tell you this because you can use that variety pack to give to a friend, you can keep it for yourself or whatever. Any purchase gets you that free variety pack. Supporting our sponsors supports this channel. It's how we create what we create. And I only choose products that I personally use, and that's why I'm proud to talk about them. So after this video, check that link out directly underneath this video in the top line of the description. The Journal of Applied Physiology. This was a very landmark paper, like it's been known for a while. Okay, it took a look at 119 subjects, and it had them do 3 different kinds of exercises. It had them do regular aerobic training, it had them do regular resistance training, and it had them do aerobic plus resistance training for 8 months. Okay, a lot of times when you look at these kinds of papers and you're looking at fat loss, it's like, okay, well, yeah, your rate of beta oxidation or fat oxidation was higher in this group, and that matters, but in the short term, like fat oxidation and using fat during a workout doesn't necessarily mean fat loss, right? That means you're burning fat. But when you look at the big picture, what actually drives the most fat loss? And that includes things like makes it so you eat less, so that you consume less calories throughout the day. Like, these kinds of things matter a lot. So what they found is that aerobic training drove the most fat loss. Along the same lines as aerobic training plus resistance training. Similar amounts of fat loss, actually. Now, what was interesting is that resistance training didn't drive a whole lot of fat loss, but what's even more interesting is that even when they doubled the amount of time that subjects would resistance train, so they doubled the amount of time, the time commitment, aerobic training and aerobic plus resistance still beat them out in a very significant way. Now, we could break this down in a very simple way first. Unfortunately, when we go into the gym to resistance train, we're not burning a lot of calories. Yes, we're putting on muscle, and yes, that could absolutely contribute to a higher metabolic rate, but I think a lot of us unfortunately underestimate how much goes into putting on like a pound of muscle, right? It's a lot of work, and it takes a lot of effort and sort of focus to make sure your protein intake is right and all this. And absolutely, it can be done, and it is done a lot. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. I'm saying you absolutely should. But what's interesting is that for sedentary people, which is what this paper looked at, it looked at sedentary, untrained people that were just getting started. The maximum amount of fat loss came from purely aerobic training. And you have to ask yourself one very important thing. What is your goal when it comes down to getting started? Is your goal fat loss? If your goal is fat loss and you have minimum amounts of time, your best use of time is what is going to burn the most calories, but is also what is going to keep you satiated. So this is where the intensity matters significantly. Okay, There is a lot of somewhat, well, it's kind of vague evidence that suggests the higher the intensity of cardio, the more the appetite throughout the course of the day, right? So there is a fine line, right? Where if you get up in the morning and you do a bunch of cardio and you push it really, really hard, that later on in the day, you're going to try to compensate by eating more. But a lot of evidence also suggests that it's psychosomatic, that people think they are more hungry, when in reality, they're not actually that much more hungry. So realistically, if you do train hard and you do push it with your cardio and you burn more calories, usually when you look at the big picture, net, you are still coming out quite a bit ahead. And remember, cardio is going to increase the amount of fuel burned as fat. When you go into the gym and you resistance train, you are making an investment in your future. That's what you have to remember. Now, that's not sexy, right? Because everyone wants quick results. But everyone goes into the gym starting to resistance train, expecting these quick results, and sometimes they demotivate themselves because the gains don't come as fast as they would think. The gains will likely come faster if you drop the fat first. Now, let me give you a couple of colloquial reasons why. One, you reduce the fat mass, you reduce the inflammation. Okay? If you reduce the inflammation, you improve the signaling, you improve the insulin signaling, which, believe it or not, can make it easier to build muscle. If you are insulin resistant and you're not very sensitive, it's going to be harder to get the stimulus that you need to build muscle in the first place. This being said, when we look at this paper in the Journal of Applied Physiology, there were tremendous benefits from people that did aerobic plus resistance training. So instead of going into the gym and lifting for, say, 60 minutes, you might literally be better off to do 30 or 40 minutes of a combination cardio and resistance training. Maybe that's something like doing squat thrusters, right? That's where you take 2 dumbbells and you're squatting, and then when you come up, you thrust the dumbbells up. So you're doing like a squat to a shoulder press. The reason I mention this is because it's a perfect example of something that combines strength and combines cardio. If your goal is to become a bodybuilder and put on as much muscle as possible, that's a different situation altogether. Your training periodization, your strength work, it might look entirely different. And that's completely fine. But this video is for the people getting started. And for people getting started, again, I say it once more, don't miss the forest for the trees. You need to focus on the fat loss if you want to get the look that you're after. And with that, you need to do the cardio. There are times when you could absolutely reduce your cardio or substitute it for a different kind. I'm a huge fan of walking. I'm a huge fan of periodizing your cardio. If you like to go on a spin bike and push it hard all the way, go for it. It's going to work. If you like to go on the elliptical for 75 minutes, go for it. It's going to work. If you like to go for a walk and walk 20,000 steps, go for it. It's going to work. Okay? But please don't forget some simple things. By going for a longer walk or longer cardio, you're also going a longer time away from food. You're putting yourself into more of a deficit by sheer time. One of the things that people run into as far as an issue is if they do high intensity interval training, they stimulate their appetite like mad, even though they got a lot of fat loss, and they only were away from food for a short amount of time. Now, I love high intensity interval training. I get behind it. I think it's the best form of cardio, especially for a trained person, and especially for someone that's trying to get the minimum effective dose. But if you're trying to get started, sometimes the steady state cardio is the best because you're getting good calorie burn, you're getting fat oxidation, meaning you're getting a majority of the calories burned as fat, and you're away from food for the longest amount of time. And in today's society, abstaining from food for as long as possible, not necessarily in the sense of fasting or anything like that, but just being away from the temptation, that matters. Now, there's other secondary things that happen, particularly in men when you start seeing, okay, the biggest correlation that we even have at all with testosterone levels that's even remotely statistically significant is that body fat is negatively correlated with testosterone and abdominal fat. You get the fat down lower and the testosterone levels can go higher. And it's that simple. And that's the only real solid link that we have there. Everything else is kind of this minutia of, well, sometimes resistance training does this to testosterone, sometimes this, but the only exercise that actually has been shown in the World Journal of Men's Health has actually been cardiorespiratory fitness. Cardio actually increases testosterone the most. And it's not because it's magical because you're moving your body in a certain way, it's because people that do cardio drop the most fat. So even if this video taught you something that you already knew deep down, I'm hoping that it taught you to rise above a lot of the crazy content that's out there and keep it simple. Move your body, do your cardio, drop the fat, and focus on that first. And I promise you the rest starts to fall into place. I'll see you tomorrow.